I'll start and introduce you to Andrew Williamson.
Off.
There you go.
Is that better? Oh yeah, I'll speak softly. Okay, it's going round. So my name's Andrew Williamson. I'm an arable farmer from Shropshire. We farm about 900 acres of combinable crops based around wheat, barley, orchard, rape, oats and spring beans. I've recently completed a Nuffield scholarship looking at precision agriculture. The reason why I did this is because we've been using precision agriculture at home since about 2007 when we started yield mapping. We then used those yield maps to target soil sample to find if there was a correlation between the yield and the soil type or the soil index. There generally wasn't. There was something else driving the yield, namely topography or soil type, shading, woodlands, that sort of thing. We use those maps to create offtake maps for variable rate P and K. We also use a Yara N sensor for variable rate nitrogen. We have done some experimenting with using variable rate PGRs and fungicides with the N sensor. All of our kit uses auto steer. We've got auto section control on the sprayer and auto boom height. Also, we're doing some work with electrical conductivity to assess different soil types and do variable rate seeding plans. But really why I'm here today is because we're starting to do a little bit of work with a company called Ursula, I'm sure you're all aware of, based in Aberystwyth, who operate a drone or a UAV, and we're using that they can successfully map blackgrass at the moment, but blackgrass, I have to be very careful where I'm stood at the moment, this geographical location, isn't a massive problem for us in Shropshire, but we have a lot of brome grass, and currently we're not able to map that, so we're working with Ursula to see if we can map the brome grass, to use that as another layer of data going forward to make more informed management decisions. So that's basically where we are. I hand over to Keith.
Hello, my name's Keith Geary. I'm representing the UAV Special Interest Group, which is based at Harper Adams University. Anybody can join the UAV Special Interest Group, and if you're interested in doing that, search on the web or drop me an email. So my company is called G2A Limited. I started this company in 2009 after coming back from Poland, where I lived for 5 years. We started the company at the Geospatial Institute building, and the first thing we did was look at how to broadcast differential GPS corrections over digital radio, and I actually spoke to Will about this technology. We had research funding to put that onto auto steering. So this is way back 4 years ago at the satellite applications catapult, which is there today at Harwell. So we worked with Leica Geosystems. Whilst doing this, we investigated precision agriculture, and we were told by the University of Leicester that a trial of potatoes had failed to get satellite imagery because of cloud cover. So we looked at using a micro UAV, and we pitched the idea to the European Space Agency based at Harwell and got funding. So we created low-level Earth observation 4 years ago. We're using a fixed-wing UAV that we build ourselves. It skid lands on the crop. You can overlay the imagery onto Google Earth and view it as a web map tile service. We also did a trial with Bayer Crop Science to map blackgrass. One of the things that we've had most success with is counting potato plants. And we're able to count all the plants in 2 fields here in Tamworth. This is 2.5 years ago, we took a trip out to China with leading experts, Callum Murray from Innovate UK and Jim Wilson from Soil Essentials. And we came up with the idea of CORE, which is integrating satellite imagery with UAV imagery, tractor-mounted sensors into a web-based mapping system. This was funded by the European Space Agency, and we're now working on a 2-year project. This is a short video to show you those that don't know how to launch a UAV. So you fit the camera system, check the battery voltages, hand launch. You can take control at any time. So it climbs to an altitude that you've set, such as 100 meters above ground level. So now it's leveling out at 100 meters above ground. Anytime you can take control of the plane, so there's a low-flying helicopter or fast jet. You monitor the position of the UAV using a ground control station on a laptop computer. So you've got real-time telemetry, which shows you 102 meters above ground level, 47 kilometers per hour, the direction it's travelling, your home position. You can use a RGB camera to take single still images. And alongside that, you can have an infrared converted camera. By taking the red channel and the infrared channel, you can combine those to give you NDVI imagery. This is 3 years ago. So now people are using multispectral cameras and higher resolution RGB cameras. So the plane just skid lands on the crop automatically, or you can land it manually. And obviously you go and retrieve it, remove the data card from the sensor. So if anybody's interested, talk to me after or drop me an email. Thank you.
Hello, I'm William Mumford. I'm the owner and managing director of AS Communications. We are the Trimble importer for this part of the world, and as part of the Trimble product lineup, we've now got the UX5 Unmanned Aerial Vehicle system, which looks very similar to the product that Keith has just shown you, except our product is a delta wing. The unique selling point for our product is our image quality is very good. Our pixel resolution is 2.5 centimetres per pixel, and we do have the ability within our Trimble Business software solution to be able to ground truth any flight that we do and create an image that is accurate geographically to plus or minus 4 centimetres in X, Y and altitude. So that gives us the ability to be able to pinpoint a problem in the field and then potentially go back afterwards and do something about it. On top of that, I've got 600 acres of heavy clay that we farm just on the Cambridgeshire-Bedfordshire border, just on the edge of Grafham Water. And I've been using variable rate technology on that farm since about 1995. We started with yield mapping and then very quickly went on to variable rate seeding. So I've been doing variable rate seeding now for about 20 years on and off.
Well, I'll stand up because I can, and I'm a Geordie. I've got something a bit different. In the world of top trumps, I might have just won. We do rotor stuff, and we work in the world of empowerment. It's our job for you to actually go and buy these things a lot cheaper, get on with it, and just go and get the data and bring it down to ground. Right? I'm not dismissing single-span aircraft, and the guys from Ursula, we had a conversation before, the work those guys do, and a real cutting-edge stuff. This, however, comes from the movie world. I think ultimately a lot of this industry has cropped up and caught people out because normally in most worlds everything starts from defence and ends up down at a commercial level where it's at a price point that works. Uncannily, this whole market, including the aircraft you just seen there, have started from the toy market and worked up. So the actual technologies come from toy up rather than aerospace down. And it has caught people unawares, and it has approached and basically come to the market in the last 2 years in leaps and bounds because it is cost effective. The bit that I've got in my hand here is the lesser spotted DJI Inspire, which has just come to market in the last month. We've put 130 of these into the UK market, and we're only one distributor for these anyway. This has actually got a 4K camera on it. Unlike the single-span aircraft, the footage you get back from this one is actually unbelievably stable. It's designed to be a movie rig, like for taking actual film footage. We're looking at that magic airspace, which is under the 400 foot. We're quite happy to deal with 100 foot, 200 foot, fly slowly, fly accurately. We can do waypoints and all the rest that goes with it. But these rigs are actually if you're a farmer, you're going to go out and you've got probably more chance of acquiring one of these to go through proof of concept and start working out your own ways of work. I know the guys here are talking about precision farming from specifics, and that's as in simple things like multispectral, getting your GPS tallied together. The integration of these products with things like GPS tractors and what have you is all coming together at the minute. The whole industry is a little bit disjointed in its GPS information. These guys will know a lot more about it than I do because I'm not an agricultural specialist. However, I'll give you 3 happy little snippets from us. We've got these out with farmers, and you're talking, I've got a Phantom with us who's like 400 quid. Just simple things, you know. I've mentioned to a few people we spoke to, we had a farmer who spotted that somebody was on the peripheral of his land. He took his dog back, got his Phantom, launched it, and then spotted there were fly tip, and using the camera, he realised the number plate, rang the police and dealt with it. I've got a guy who's knocked about 10,000 miles off his Land Rover because he just flies around his perimeters now using waypoints, and every morning, so you can just do a quick verification of his land. Even simple photogrammetry, just take it up, just have a look at your field, and if it's not being seeded out right, and one of the big problems we did have, or in a simplistic kind of way, is somebody paid for a microlight survey, the tractors went out and did their drops, they did the nitrogen and everything else that went with it, and ultimately he still had bald patches. From the road it looked like a nice lush green vegetated field, however from the air it always looks different. He wasn't going to be paying out for a helicopter, but the cool thing is he could launch one of these rigs up for £1,000, spot his bald patches and reseed them specifically on the same day. That guy got his yield up just by using a bit of nous. You don't have to have everything in specifics. You don't have to wait timelines for people to manage the data. If you're a farmer, you want it on the real time. You want kind of almost broadcast level identity. You need information come back on the same day. So again, I'm not going to dispute managed processes, but this is one way to actually get a lot closer to using UAVs in a different way. So there you go.
What Justin may have neglected to say is he didn't introduce himself, and he's called Justin Pringle, and he's a heli guy, drone development manager. There we go. Following the introductions, has anyone got a question to start us off? There's a gentleman here, and there's a gentleman with a microphone coming down.
Thank you. Simple question, really. I can appreciate getting data back from cameras to use in agriculture. Why should I use a UAV when I can have the cameras mounted on all my tractors and implements that go through the fields at regular occasion? What's the advantage for me to use a UAV?
I guess the advantage of using a UAV over a tractor-mounted system is a UAV is able to capture all the data. You fly high enough, you can capture the whole field, you can capture a lot of data very quickly. Unless you have a lot of camera-mounted, tractor-mounted cameras, you won't get all the data. You'll only see a very small part because of the altitude they're working at. So it's the ability to gain a lot of data quickly, as opposed to just, and obviously the other major thing is it's non-invasive. It's not going to do any damage to your crop.
I'll add to that as well. One of the cleverest things that happens with a couple of the farmers who got the drones is they got excited about farming again. So it's all well and good sitting on a tractor. It's all well and good your interpretation of what your land is and what you see every day and all the years you've done it. But if you get to the air, you start just visualising and viewing the whole bigger schematic of what you're doing and how you're going about it. I'll give you a really nice application. If you're in a tractor, you won't necessarily be able to see full soil saturation. We had a farmer who went up after his land flooded out, and obviously he wasn't sure, and it wasn't just looking at minerals or anything. For the first time in 12 years of farming his land, he realised he could actually cut a line across his field and drain it out because he could see it from the end where the water was sitting. It was kind of a bit extreme to dig a channel across your field, but off the back of it, it meant that he actually could see a little bit better about how it was working. You couldn't see that from a tractor. And that's the simplistic view of it. Like I say, I'm not pure agri, but again, that visualization. I think one of the other interesting things that came back to is all fields look the same. This is from the actual farmers themselves. But when you get good at doing regular aerial work, rather than just looking at a Google map once a year, if you actually start doing it on a regular basis yourself, you start seeing things totally differently, whether it be through germination. I I'll give you one very good example with a tractor. I know one guy who dumped his contractors because they weren't cutting his fields correctly. But he couldn't see that from the ground. He could only see it from the air. So there you go. There's a value add.
I'll probably just add one thing to that. This spring's been quite a late spring and it's been very wet for us. So we've not been able to get across it with a tractor. And I'm looking for my variable rate application maps to be prepared by my fertiliser advisor now and loaded in the machines. So we're able to get that application map done, get it loaded so that when it is dry we can get out there. So for me, doing the first survey when I'm passing through the crop the first time in the spring would be too late. So that's why we would go in. And we, at the moment, we haven't actually been able to get any satellite imagery because of the cloud cover we've had this winter.
I'll be back. If you speak right into the mic, that'd be brilliant.
Hello. Yes, legislation side, the bad publicity that UAVs have been getting lately, how do you think this is going to affect the legislation, and what way is it going to go?
Legislation for pilots? Looks like it's come to me. To fly a UAV for commercial purposes is quite a involved process. It's generally a two-day ground school followed by a CAA exam which you have to pass. Then for us and our vehicle, it's 5 days of flight training. You then have to write an operations manual which goes to the CAA. Once that's approved, you do a flight test, and then you're qualified to fly for commercial gain. So anybody that's gone through that process and is genuinely doing this process correctly shouldn't cause any issues with any other aircraft. The problem I have, and where I think we will come into some problems, is the people that are buying the £300 machine from Maplin, flying them anywhere and everywhere. And for me, I think it's just a matter of time before one of these gets sucked into an aircraft engine on the approach or on the climb out of an airport. Now, if the pilot's on the ball and the engine dies, he'll shut the engine down and the flight will continue as it should do. If he's been up all night drinking beer and he's a bit tired, the outcome could be very different. And when that happens, I don't know what will happen to the UAV industry, but it could cause a bit of an issue. But if you've done the job properly and you're fully qualified, you should be able to conduct flights perfectly safely without any issues to anybody else at all.
We've actually moved into the training industry because there's one thing that will kill this industry, and that's bravado. A bravado way above ability and skill set is the one thing that'll get in the way. The ability of these things, a DJI Phantom, we've had one at 1.6 kilometres high. Fair play, it wasn't in the UK, but we know of one that has been at that height. That puts elements of risk in. Let's state the obvious. Let's not be too sensationalist about this. On Christmas Day, the CA put out a warning that 10,000 UAVs were going to be in the sky on Christmas Day, knocking planes out of the sky. We have a precedent on this, and the precedent sits within the insurance industry, not with the CA. And that insurance industry tells us that anyone who's actually complied and undertaken some training to understand how to fly and is ultimately looking towards their permissions or their provisional permissions has not caused any public liability or any property liability claims in the last 2 years. There is a precedent in ability. People do crash through human error more than anything else, but there is a nice element there that people haven't died, airplanes haven't been popped out of the sky and what have you. It is a threat, I'm not going to dismiss that. But my logic would be, if you're going to get one of these things, do not use bloke rules on these. To go to Maplins, unfortunately, is the worst case scenario, because even if I go into Maplins, I will not go up to the guy and say, by the way, how does that work? My job in Maplins is to pretend I do know how it works and leave the shop without asking any questions. With drones, it's an aerial vehicle which is dangerous. You need to read all of the instructions, you need to watch the videos, and you need to get your head around how it works before you go and apply it. There is, however, an interesting aspect to flying this, and that is that you do not need to have a license to fly. You need to have a license for commercial activity. you need a license if you're going to do anything which technically is going to contravene with normal flying. But as a farmer, if you have land, as long as you understand CAP 722, which is the rules of flying, 50 metres to the left, 500 metres to the left, 500 metres to the right, 400 foot high, and then comply with simple things like distance of flying from people, vehicles that aren't in your control, roads, what have you. The unfortunate thing is, in the UK, I don't know any of you guys with a farm who probably doesn't have a road near to it, or potentially an air installation or an MOD site. Farming matches all those things. However, view it as risk. If you can eliminate or at least manage risk away from situations, which you can in an agricultural scenario or well above, say, an urban flying environment, there is ways and means to do it. So again, you don't need a license to fly as long as it's private. If it's for hobby use and for yourself, not a problem. However, as soon as you start thinking you want to make a few quid out of this, you need your permissions and you need it well. I would still advise people to go through the permissions route if these are going to be a critical part of your business as well. Okay?
Hi, my name's Richard Kemp, and I'm a drone pilot, and sitting next to another one here as well. One of the first things, sorry, bit closer. Yeah. One of the first things that I discovered was that I did some work for an agronomist, and we, in those days, were just flying Phantom, and I did a whole lot of pictures of the field, and he took 2 or 3 looks at them, and he said, "That farmer's got a lot of trouble here." He said he's got compaction all over the top of his field, and that's the sort of thing that I think Heli Guy were being referring to. Simply, you can get up above your fields and actually see things that are problems with your fields and farm, and you can do something about it quite simply. So, if you can, and you have the interest to do it, I suggest it actually is quite useful to have a good look round.
Sorry, can I put a question out there? Has anyone actually got a drone? Any farmers got a drone? What have you actually flying? What have you got? And how do you use it?
The things that you can see from the air, even just 200 or 300 feet, it's amazing what shows up. Poor drainage, compaction, missing bits of crop and whatnot. I mean, the first time I flew it, I realised how many slates were missing off the house roof. I mean, it's just the quality of the pictures are crazy. They're really good. So I'd recommend them anyway. I think they're very good.
So I think a big bit is the maintenance of the farm, how you actually manage the farm, and if you can prevent getting ripped off by a local builder putting scaffolding up to have a look at your chimney breast, you can pay for yourself quite fast. We have had 3 real unbelievably good commercial applications in the last few weeks. One of which was to actually go and test inside a silage tank. So you can actually fly these things in areas where you don't want to have human risk. If you fly indoors, you don't need any license to do that because it's not in control, it's not airborne. We're using them to use RFID tag readings. So we're counting camels in Dubai using drones at the minute. And then other applications, similar things like how many times do you have to cut all of your ditches out every year, as in all of your ditches. If you go and you fly after it's been raining, you might only have to do about a quarter of that work that you normally plan in. There is no way a contractor is going to come in and tell you need to do less work this year. They're always going to tell you they want more and they'll charge you more. This is just a clever way to just make sure you're getting your value for money as well.
Hi guys, thanks for that. I'd like to ask about what the future's going to be for UAVs. I mean, you touched on multi-spec cameras there, and I know you do NDVIs now. I'm just thinking, what are you going to be analysing in the future, and what else can you tell us about our fields as time goes on?
Okay, so what we're going to do in the future, what we're doing at the moment is with what we are personally doing at home, we're trying to map brome grass in our crops. And from my little introduction, I mentioned the fact that we're doing variable rate seed rate as well, based on soil type. So what we've done historically on some light land, we have reduced our seed rate because we get a higher germination percentage, better soil to seed contact, and that would, on one part, be the right thing to do. But then we fly the field with a drone and we're trying to assess the weed population, and lo and behold, on that light land where we've had a low plant population, we've got a bigger weed problem. So by being clever with the variable rate seed, we've actually done completely the wrong thing, because we've only looked at one layer of data. So now we can start to use these weed maps. And I was told earlier that I could have just easily just draw a layer polygon around it, stick it in the gatekeeper, which I probably could do. But the point is, with the weed maps, we can then identify smaller polygons on a more accurate basis and make a more informed decision. So we look at more than one thing at a time. And actually, the other thing you can start to see, you may think you've got a big grassweed problem, particularly in one field. But this field, we thought we got a big problem with brome grass. It looked horrendous. And no farmer in June and July wants to go and look at their crops, because all the weeds pop up above the canopy and it looks bloody awful. But the point is, in that area where it was really bad, it was only 4% of the field. So we didn't really, there's no other way to assess that amount of weed population without taking an aerial image, in my opinion. So that's where we're going to go forward. But obviously, where we want to get to, the holy grail with regard to the site-specific weed management, is we want to get a drone that will take a capture an image and tell me where my black grass is, where my brome grass is in October, not in June. So then we have the opportunity to go in with our herbicides and treat at that time. At this moment in time, that is not possible. But that is purely a data management thing, looking at the spectral reflectance, in my opinion. The guys in the room who know a lot more about this than I do may disagree, but that's where we need to get to, and then we start to get real value, and then we can use that data in real time, or essentially in real time, for an informed decision and go forward, rather than always firefighting the problem. And you may find out around here, if you fly in some fields with a lot of blackgrass in, if you've got 80% blackgrass, should you really be farming that the way you have been in the last 5 years, or do you need to take a bit more radical decision and look outside the box a bit? So that is my opinion, and the other guys will probably go a totally different one.
No, I agree with that. On remote sensing, which is what we're talking about, then it's pretty much done. So 5 years ago, this was a research topic. We're just now starting to see the commercialization. So I think over the next year, I know of one large American company that's going to launch its cereals. But this is all about remote sensing. So remote sensing's done, or is more or less done research-wise. Where the research is at aerial applications. So if you imagine a drone that can deliver slug pellets, I know the Forestry Commission have been looking at spraying bracken. If you're looking in the Far East in Japan, they have large Yamaha remote-controlled helicopters and they spray paddy fields. It's amazing. You wouldn't get away with it here with drift, but they're doing it. So if you wanted my opinion on research, 20 years from now, I could envisage some kind of UAV doing a job, whether that be some kind of weeding on grapevines, whether that be applications of slug pellets or fertilizers. That's obviously, we've got weight limits, but the CAA are always open to exceptions. So if you had a 50 kg UAV, you can apply to the CAA, get special permission, and that's where the research is. But remote sensing, in my opinion, the research is more or less done. It's now in the commercialization. Do you guys want to say anything?
Personally, I'd like to see a UAV on every farm, and I'd like to see that UAV take off every morning, do a full analysis of the crop, a full nutrient analysis, land itself, transfer that data either to the cloud or to the office, so that we can tweak the nutrients on the crop and get, in the case of wheat, to the holy grail of 20 tonnes a hectare across the field. So if we could come up with a map that says this is where we're deficient in, say, sulphur, this is where we're deficient in manganese, then using direct injection techniques into the sprayer boom, we could treat the field very, very individually and get the crop up to a sensible level.
Yeah, I'm with Will. I'd go as far as saying in 5 years' time, if a farm doesn't have a UAV, it's not making any money. That's as simple as it gets. It's just a new technology nobody really knows that much about yet. It is a vehicle, it's a device, it's a way to save money. You know, I've got a farmer who knocked 11,000 miles off his Land Rover just because he doesn't have to go down to his borders anymore and come back. I'll take a different bent. I really do see these things as being unbelievably good data management tools to actually go out and do audits and to literally just start doing inspections for you, which actually alleviate and remove the human aspect. We've just worked with a company that counts steel stock, which doesn't sound that glamorous when you put it in that context of counting steel, but they have 200,000 steel items in a 1 kilometre square yard, and we have a drone that cost $5,000 that launches, autonomously flies over. The cool thing is, because it's a drone, it doesn't get in the way of your normal working day. It's above your head. It's not an interaction thing that gets in the way. It flies over the steel stock, and within 22 minutes, it does an audit that used to take 3 guys 4 days to do. And it's 98.5% accurate reading RFID tags, whereas the human aspect was 82%. So that accuracy is worth a few quid. If you start applying that to animal management, put RFID tags on all the cows, all the pigs, all the sheep, go and fly the field. Do get a countdown audit of what you've actually got in terms of stock. That alleviates a tenuous task that is kind of problematic, especially if you miss one of them. Let the drone go out and find it. The next phase is then the intelligence starts flipping and you start saying, I need to go out and find a specific animal. The drone will go and hover over it, or it'll give you a visual interpretation of where that animal is. We're working with, we've not had any snow this year or the last year, but I've got the world's smallest thermal camera in my hand at the minute for a drone. This is $4,000. We're going to get them built into these rigs here quite soon. The no-brainer with that is that means that if you've got a fox or you've got pests or you've got anything on site, you can go out, you can track it, you can find it. But beyond that, if we had sheep that were all basically went missing from the air, you can actually go and find where those sheep are in the snow and not waste a whole day and put other people in, items at risk when you can actually go out and find it. The crop aspect for us is quite massive, and that's predominantly photogrammetry and then sits down to a thermal level, which is difficult with UAVs, and then also in multispectral. I think the whole industry is desperate for the sensors to be brought on a lot faster. They need to be more cost effective. A $4,500 multispectral camera, which is technically a camera with a filter off it. That's an exaggerated version of what a multispectral is. But ultimately, I think what we will see is we'll see a lot more cloud computing come in. You'll collect all this data. This data will be remotely managed, like Will said. The drones will fly. The farmer will launch the drone, or the drone will fly autonomously. The farmer will put the battery in the rig. The battery will go and fly an autonomous route. It will land itself. It will silo itself. That data will forensically be straight back to the company that needs the data. So there's no even human interaction of losing memory cards. That information will be siloed in big servos and a cloud. And whenever you need to access that information, it will be processed live and it will be processed online. And you'll get the intrinsic data coming back to you. There'll be a massive commercial aspect in farming for paying your way to actually access data and manage data. It already happens in the 3D modelling world. We work with Pix4D to do 3D modelling. There's a few other companies, a Q3D and a few others all coming to market. You'll see 3D modelling and 3D aspects coming to market quite strong using the drones as well. And they're all activities that you need an aerial vehicle to make them work. I think, interestingly, more than anything else, already now that the price point has come down to that magic £1,000, it's very accessible. It's just a case of building precedents, understanding scalability, understanding best practice to go forward and do it, and ultimately having enough information and newsworthy stories to actually make a willingness to want people to go and do it. The commercial world we thought would kick 7 colours out of this. The commercial world hasn't really existed in the drone world. It's still the hobbyist. It's still 95% of the work we do is still the movie and the TV industry. That's where it is. They get a value because straight away they're not hiring a helicopter, which is expensive. How many farms actually do hire helicopters? Plenty of them use microlights. All the microlight guys are already buying these, and I know that because I'm selling it to them. They've already worked out what the next phase is. It's that empowerment at a local level, I think, which would be immense, and then taking that data to a better national level, and then having a national body or national body seeing value in the whole of the UK field, and it's that specific data down to a millimetre, which is going to be really, really worthy of somebody investing a lot of money in. The UK investment in drones has been. If we had a UK manufacturer specifically at this level, everything's Chinese and Chinese-led. Even the American market hasn't got their head round it. The best market that we've seen, and I've not had a conversation with Will, but the best market we've seen for agriculture has been Italy. And their rules are actually stronger and harder to comply with than they are in the UK. But the reason that that's moved on at pace is because they actually have companies that manufacture thermal sensors. They have manufacturers of the data capture, and they seem to have a reason to push it harder. 40 pilots are leaving the Italian service every month and joining agriculture for UAV specific. In the UK, there might be 1 out of 20 guys that go through training and women, sorry. There might be 1 out of 20 people that go through that have a vague interest in using UAVs for agriculture. The interesting thing is, for me, it will be a transition. Those people who are working in the movie and the TV and the broadcast industry, the graduates who are going out, who are in their mid-20s, going out and buying these things, spotting an opportunity, will transition their skills and help the farmers get to where they need to get to cost effectively. I think.
I've just got one other thing to add to that. We're talking about a lot of data with these things, typically multiple gigabytes of data, and at the moment our broadband infrastructure in the rural area is not enough to support that. So, if you want to do anything, go and badger the best MP that money can buy and get him to put broadband infrastructure into the rural areas.
Hi, Ian Cameron, Commercial Agriculture. I think I'd just like to put our view as well as to what we think the future of the industry is going to be. I think from Commercial Agriculture's point of view, we think it's the analytics and the data that matter. A drone is a drone. There's loads and loads of drones out there. They're all effectively a way of getting a sensor deployed in the sky. From our point of view, we don't really care what that method is of getting the drone into the farm, into the field. It's the point that you take the imagery, you do the analysis, and put that into your management chain. All the analytics there, making them standard, repeatable, so that a blackgrass map you make this year is the same next year and the same next year, when you might be capturing your images at slightly different times of year, slightly different lighting conditions, slightly different crop situations on the ground. Every year is different in agriculture. Having analytics that allow you to be standard, repeatable, calibratable is all remote sensing expertise, as Keith says, but making that work operationally, routinely, that from our point of view, I think, is where the focus has got to be. I think there really is a very good case for having a UAV that you just use to get imagery that you interpret and understand, but your interpretation from year to year to year isn't always going to be the same. So having that standardised, analytics-driven sort of layer as well, and making that as simple and easy to use as possible, that I think is going to really, from our view, is going to really help things move forwards as well. Getting less hung up on what the drone technology is and more on what you do with the data. Just thought that might be useful to throw that in there.
I'll add to that, because we've been working with defence companies at the highest level. This is like United Aerospace, British Airways, Celex. And there is a lot of data out there, but it's not accessible data. They've had satellite data for years, which have been looking at fields and IR perspective, and that data has never been brought together because it's too valuable to give away. The interesting thing is the IT infrastructure, data management, big data, all those things that have appeared over the last few years have been easy to implement because the companies, the businesses, the vertical markets have already had lots of data accessible. There's plenty of photographs, plenty of information. At the minute, we're sitting on a cusp of a new industry that has no precedent. To make any of this work, you need, specifically in agriculture, you need 1 year's worth of KPIs. If you're going to start implementing this now, you're only going to have critical data in 2, 3, 4 years' time. At that point, the early adopters will be way ahead, and the information will be quite good. There's nobody yet looking at a whole territory and saying, right, Northumberland, we're going to do aerial surveys every week of a sample amount of farms. I know the likes of Trimble and other companies will be doing samples, but in general, when it gets to the point where 50% of farms have aerial data that can be analysed, that's when we get to a real critical mass, which will be immense. At the minute, it's a valuable commodity, it's a paid-for commodity. It's interesting how fast it can come down to the lower level, like an application on your phone. That's what will make the change, and it'll be... I really, really do think, unfortunately, it will be academic-led rather than commercial-led, this one. Once the graduates leave, it's the same as the IT market. The IT market took ages to get up and running because they needed intelligent folks who had a focus and had a remit to push it on. The UAV market, at the minute, it's just people taking an interest in getting on with it. We've put these into... We had Northumbria University with us yesterday. We had Durham University last week. The geology guys get it. The farming guys haven't got it yet. Don't get me wrong, you've got Harper Adams have a remit for drones. We're dealing with Burton. It's a different market. The academic principles behind the whole systems are just kind of a little bit different. The mega farmers and the big farmers of the UK, who we already have had dialogue with, will find a way to make these things work, I think. But the common players, this is perfect for any size farm, no matter how small and how large. You just need a definite way to interpret the data. We just need that interpretation of the data to line up. I can sell thousands of these, and I'd happily send thousands of these. But ultimately, the minute there's no cloud management of any of this data, and the accessibility seems to be quite expensive, let's be done. Because they'll look at you as a case by case and say, I want $5,000 off you, then I'll start. That needs to be pulled back. United Aerospace have got some amazing technology, which we've seen, and it is like bloody Minority Report. It's a dashboard, and you can look at a field and then scroll back with your finger, and you can actually see the field day, and that's using their satellite analysis. If you can do that as a farmer and actually start building your own case studies on time-lapse, how amazing would that be? And like I said before, that's the kind of stuff you'd show your mates in the pub. You go around and my pub, look how good my farm is because I'm in more control of my own data. That's the point. Empowerment again, and just getting the data working for you right.
Can I respond to that from a farmer's perspective? Now, we've heard an awful lot recently about gathering data and taking pictures and everything else from a drone, but if you're an academic and someone's paying you to capture data, all very well and good, but we're farmers and we need to make sure that data has some value and that image is worth capturing. So until we get to the point where we can actually analyse that data correctly to give us some profitable and increase our bottom line, then all we're going to do is continue what we've done for the last 20 years with yield maps and gather lots and lots of data, look at it once, consign it to the bottom drawer, and never look at it again. So the capturing data is done. We can do that. There's lots of people who will gather data for you, but there are very few who will analyse that data and give you a real, meaningful value to it, and which will add value to your bottom line. That is where we've got to get to. Not taking a picture every single day to see how it changes, because if we can't do anything about it, what is the point of spending the money gathering that data? We have to be able to analyse the data to make us more profitable. And that is the bottom line.
I'm coming back in now. Right. The whole point of these systems are, if you can collate a year's worth of data in a year's time, you'll be able to process it better. And it has to be like that too.
The point is the processing ability isn't there.
Yeah, I agree with that.
That's what we need to improve. We can all get data, but at the moment we can't process it to give us a value to it. We can get lots of images, but we can't... You could get an image of a crop, but you don't know what's causing it. And Will mentioned it before about, what is it? Is it nitrogen? Is it phosphate? Is it potash? Is it soil type? Is the fact that we've had an inch of rain last week, but next week it's going to be dry? We live in a different world. Farmers, we have to make decisions on the day and take a gamble as what's going to happen next. Because more often than not, what we do today is only going to be affected by what happens tomorrow. So historical data has its value, but we need to be able to look further forward than that. And we need to know and understand why, in certain circumstances, this thing is having this effect. And I think they have a role, but they're not the panacea. And then we need to understand the data more than the collection of it.
Not disputing that.
We've been mucking about with precision farming for 20 years, and the question I would ask is, are we any further forward than when we first drew a yield map? And in some cases, we're going backwards because we can only control a machine, often the width of the machine. So when we started 20 years ago, we'd got 12-metre fertiliser spreaders and we were varying the rate. We've now got 36, 50, in some cases 55-metre sprayers, and we can only vary the rate across that whole machine. So in a lot of respects, we're going backwards. And I don't believe that in the UK there's been enough research into precision agriculture, and also what scale should we be working to? Should we treat each square metre of our field differently? Should we treat each plant differently? Or is it acceptable to treat a block 36 metres wide as a square? And I don't think anyone's ever yet answered that, or even put any research into to give us the result. Perhaps some of our research colleagues in the audience could perhaps head down that road.
Thank you. It's a comment rather than a question, really. As an agronomist, I spend quite a lot of time looking at crops in the local area for various farms. I tend to try and work on the theory, if I look at this crop and if I do something, can I make a change that will improve that crop and make it different? And that's exactly where you said we were. And we've got all this stuff, and half the things we can't actually change. Unless we can change, unless we can improve, unless we can make it efficient, we won't improve. The UAVs are going to help, they're going to give us some data, but we've got to be able to use that data. And I don't think we are any further forward than we were 20 years ago, frankly, with precision farming. I think in a lot of ways we're entering a period of where we're looking at integrated pest management, which is a key factor in farming, and we're actually doing less integrated pest management than we were 20 or 30 years ago. Many farms are large, many farms use routine applications, and you have to argue that for growing commodity crops such as cereals and rapes is probably the right way, because that's the way it's developed.
Does anybody else have any more questions? Final word from each panellist in turn. How does that sound? Word, I said.
Just to keep this even simpler, it's about return on investment. If you're going to splash £1,000 at something, you can get more than £1,000 back, you've won. The difference is you couldn't do this for £1,000 a couple of years ago. You couldn't even do it for £1,000 last year. That's the difference. We're not talking about £50,000, £100,000 infrastructures. We're talking about something that allows you to go and get more information relative to the amount of money you're going to put down. And the interesting thing is, I think the return on investment is actually a lot simpler than changing the world. It's about whether you can get your money back sharpish and view it on that basis. The precision farming aspect, I get it, that's the whole reason that we're here. But this is a device that allows you to get better, easier to capture data without having to call the helicopters in. That's purely it. It's just a posh telescope. So there you
go. So final word, I would say that I think we're at a very exciting stage of agriculture. We've got customers out there that want to buy product from us. They want to know where it was grown, how it was grown. They want to know if it was grown sustainably. And I think we are at a stage where we can probably fulfil those needs. And if we fulfil that market, I think our agricultural industry has got a great future and a very exciting future. So personally, I'm very excited by all this stuff and all this UAV technology. We're at the beginnings of it, but I'm really excited where this can take us in as an industry moving forward.
I would like to say that on remote sensing with micro UAVs, there's two distinct differences. So the DJI out-of-the-box quadcopter is good for crop scouting, but if you want to do wide area mapping of 25 hectares in 20 minutes, then you need something like a fixed-wing UAV with a good camera and a gimbal. And we do have online processing within 4 hours, viewable on Google Earth. And as I mentioned, the core project, I'm working with Soil Essentials, and this summer we'll have satellite imagery integrated with Yara N sensor data and other crop types, and UAV data. So we're not that far away. I would say by next year you could have an Android tablet stood in a field where a UAV had flown in the morning, and you'll be comparing it in different data layers to satellite imagery. We've done some trials last year with the Yara N sensor, and we flew the UAV at the same time. So you'll see it integrated within other kinds of satellite imagery, track demand and sensor data by next year.
So I get the final word then. All I will say is that they're a great tool to gather data, but be very mindful and make sure you know what you want to do with that data before you collect it, and how you're going to analyse and how you're going to gain from it. And that was simply it. If it's going to be useful, use it. If you can get something out of it, use it. But please refrain from this habitual habit we've had for the last 20 years of gaining data and information just because we can. Gain it for a reason, and namely that means profit and increasing agricultural output.